Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and for sticking around after lunch. I bet I will try not to bore you too much. So let's get started. So I'm going to be talking to you today about unblocking supply chain transformation, which is a topic that really we've been talking about for quite some time. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. A lot of people don't know this, but I got my first job out of university in the food manufacturing sector, working in the wine industry in Latin America. And this was about 27 years ago, and supply chain looked very different then. We were more considered to be sort of back office, in the warehouse, logistics, sort of please don't come out of the dark. And I've seen the profession evolve significantly. Over the course of a career of 27 plus years, I have had the privilege and opportunity of seeing that evolution, but equally of talking to quite a lot of people. And as you can see, I'm kind of a busy person, and I have my fingers in a lot of pies, which gives me a great perspective on the supply chain industry. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of the Future Insights Network, which is a network of over 130,000 senior supply chain procurement digital leaders who engage with our content, engage with our events, engage with quite a number of things that I do. So the beauty of this group is that it's very varied. I've got people here from large-scale organizations, brands that you probably recognize there, and multiple countries, multiple industries, and really quite a number of them. So I'm also the host of the Transform Talks podcast. This is a podcast that you can find on Spotify, by the way, Transform Talks with Villablanca. And I'm 200 episodes into this podcast. Again, I get to interview all kinds of different people, whether they are people from academia, from the public sector, from government, from large-scale institutions, from tech companies. And we talk all things related to transformation. So it gives me, again, a unique perspective to be able to take you on a bit of a journey in the 19 minutes that I've got left, 19 and a half minutes that I've got left. And that is going to be about how we unblock transformation. But before we get into unblocking the transformation, I want to talk a little bit about how the supply chain industry has evolved. So bear with me. I know it's after lunch. I know it's a bit warm. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson. It all started in... No, I'm just kidding. Basically, we're going to take this in 3 chunks. We're going to talk a little bit about how the supply chain profession has evolved in a relative peaceful period of stability post-World War II, to the COVID years, you know, that big blip right there, and then what the supply chain industry and procurement is going to look like in the future. So let's talk a little bit about right after World War II. The world had stopped. Big crisis, and then we went into a period of a bit of stability. So what did that look like? Well, funnily enough, we had very little public acknowledgement of the supply chain and procurement profession. I call this my neighbor test. I don't know about you, but every time a neighbor would ask me what you do, I would dread that question. I would think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to explain supply chain to them. They're not going to understand what that is. So that's kind of how it was. We had... It was very back office function based. Planes, trains, and automobiles and warehouses. That's kind of what people thought this was all about, right? A lot of decision making was cost driven, or actually, let's say this, solely cost driven. And that has changed a little bit. There was very little business or strategic involvement from the supply chain. It was just a question of doing and reducing costs. Lots of manual processes as well. I remember that back many, many years ago. Lots of manual processes. And I know this, this hasn't changed that much. Lots of Excel spreadsheets, by the way. Who here still uses Excel spreadsheets all the time? Yeah, exactly, me too. Yeah, I know, that hasn't changed. One of the other things I noticed is difficulty attracting and retaining top talent, low job satisfaction. This was based on a report that was done by the Association of Supply Chain Management of how things were looking back many years ago. Okay. Now we're going to go to the recent past. This blip, these last couple of years that have been very strange, haven't they? What have we seen in the recent past? Well, geopolitical issues. No big brainer. The COVID situation. This is, I mean, you can read the list. staffing shortages. We had truck drivers that nobody could find. Raw materials are also a shortage of them due to war or climate change or what have you. Extreme climate events, trade disputes, etc. All of this is just what we're dealing with at the moment. Now, I think that this has created the perfect storm for supply chain transformation, because all of these things that are happening right here are also happening with the pace of technological change that is faster than we've ever seen it. It's as though every minute I look, there's a new tool, a new something or other that is just going to replace what we had. We also have changes in consumer behavior. These are also big macro forces and mega trends as well that are having an impact on creating, sorry, I'm just going to breeze through all these little highlights there, what I call the cocktail of crisis. Why do I call it that? I had the pleasure of interviewing Vineet Khanna, who used to be the Senior Vice President for Global Supply Chain of Nestle back in 2022. And he said something which stuck with me, which was, Maria, it seems like the world is drinking from a heady cocktail. And I just thought, no, this is not a heady cocktail. This is a cocktail of crisis. It's not even a black swan event. It's a flock of black swans. It's like the movie Birds. That's what the last 3 years felt like. Every little thing attacking us. And so it created this perfect storm of crisis, change, evolution. That's the world that we're living in right now. And so one thing I can tell you that this cocktail of crisis has done is that it's made supply chain go mainstream. Have you noticed this? You put on BBC, CNN, Sky, and people are talking supply chain. Isn't that fantastic? We also started to maybe get involved in the boardroom, get invited to have conversations on strategic value for the business. We noticed visibility efforts have substantially accelerated. People are being driven by whether they're consumers, whether they're ESG regulations, whatever it is. Visibility has become top of mind. Sustainability and ESG did take a bit of a backseat during COVID because we were all so busy crisis managing, but it is prime and one of the big drivers. We saw transportation costs go up, as of course everybody noticed that. And then I like to say that here are the big problems, problem with an S there that's floating. A lot of pressure on the supply chain, right? But it created a lot of opportunity with an ES there. As you can see, my formatting is a bit off. What I noticed is that the last couple of years exposed the cracks within supply chains. It exposed that antiquated methodologies and business operating models are just not going to cut it for this world that we live in now with multiple flock of black swan things that we're living in. So it's also what I've seen in terms of the opportunity is I've noticed through my many interviews that supply chain is highly influential in business strategy, highly influential. Whether it's procurement function, the supply chain function in general, manufacturing, business operations has become a very influential part in business strategy. So what's the supply chain of the future going to look like? I've just told you about the past, told you about the recent past. What does the future look like? So I'm going to ask you guys, predictions. What's a big prediction here? Anybody want to jump in and tell me what you think the supply chain of the future is going to look like? Regional? Could be, yeah? What else? Anybody? Come on, guys, jump on in. Yeah, more connected than ever. Real time. It's going to be filled with data. But I'll get into it. I wrote a slide. So, the supply chain of the future is a collection of autonomous micro supply chains. And this is from a report that I read, well, several reports, KPMG report, Gartner reports, and talking to people on a regular basis. Is the term supply chain even useful anymore? Is it really a supply chain? Or is it a supply chain ecosystem? Is this a living, breathing ecosystem of micro supply chains everywhere? We're noticing it's going to be powered by modular capabilities. It's going to be very data-driven. And resilience, we need to talk about resilience. How do you even build a resilient supply chain with the cocktail of crisis, with the pace of technological change, with consumer behaviors changing, with all of that? That is the perfect storm we are operating right now. And one of the things I like this is here is about taking decision making to a new level. The use of, large language models. How is ChatGPT? Has anybody here using ChatGPT? Yeah? Who's using it for work? Ooh, how are you using it, if you don't mind my asking? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, what about you? Market research, yeah? What about Gen AI? I mean, who's using generative AI in their business at the moment? Yeah, exactly. I know, everyone's talking about it, but who's using it? That's the key. The supply chain of the future is going to be underpinned by sustainability. This isn't a nice to have, right? This is going to be one of those things that you have to do, not just because of regulatory compliance, but also because your customers and your employees are demanding it. And so sustainability is going to be at the forefront of everything that you're going to be doing. So, geopolitical tension, that big black swan stuff, that is not going away. It's going to be perhaps one of the biggest and most important points of the cocktail of crisis, right? Sustainable, hyper-customized offerings, and customer experiences are going to take priority. We've seen quite a lot of shifts to D2C, direct-to-consumer, companies that you never would have thought would be direct-to-consumer. I mean, I'm talking about companies that sell paint, or sell chemicals. This is a big change in operating models. Agility is the biggest driver of competitive advantage and resilience. That's a nice thing to throw around, but what does it actually mean? What does agility actually mean? How do you build resilience? What is it actually for? Talent, and more talent. So how do we, in procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, compete with the Googles, with the Yahoos, with the, amazingly cool companies that sell technology and have beanbags? How do we compete with that sort of stuff? Well, we need digitally literate talent, and we need them in an environment that is safe to fail and that can explore different types of innovations and different types of ways to fail. And then the term supply chain maybe becomes obsolete. I see quite a number of examples, by the way, of companies that no longer use supply chain. Anybody here from Unilever? They don't use supply chain anymore. They are business operations. They've changed their entire business that they no longer have supply chain. They are business operations. Doesn't that speak better to what this actually does in a business? That you're running the operations of a business? Well, I bet you didn't know that. Normal is not coming back. If you don't know that, that's a news flash. 2019 and before, not happening at all. Okay? So now that we know that, let's talk about transformation with an N over there. Yeah. It's not transformation, it's transformation with an N at the end. That's just kidding. This is a big word because a lot of people think transformation is some sort of finite thing. I started this transformation and it's going to end here. Fail. I see a lot of transformations that are happening in silos. Fail. I see a lot of transformations that are not looking to solve problems. Fail. I see transformations that are responding to God knows what pressure, but not actually making it easier for their employees, for their customers, for their suppliers. Fail. We know this statistic. Where is it? Hello. There we go. You know this. McKinsey said it. Boston Consulting Group is now saying the same thing. 70% of transformation projects fail. Do you know how much the consulting industry is worth yearly? Do you know how much the software industry is worth yearly? The training industry, the leadership industry? Hundreds of billions? And yet, 70% of them are failing. Why? Why is that happening? Anybody want to take a guess? It's in the next slide, but I will, anybody want to take a guess? Yes. Yeah, but that's probably because they were transforming the wrong thing or they weren't solving the problem. It's kind of like building HS2. you know? It's this big, this big, I don't know, boondoggle that then you can't really, it's not solving any problem. Okay, now we're gonna get into the good part, the unblocking of transformation. So I interview a lot of people. I speak to a lot of people. I go to a lot of events. I'm never home, basically. And at these opportunities, I interview people about why these transformation projects are failing. What's happening here? A lot of these events, I sit in at these sessions and people ask the same question over and over. They don't say, what is transformation or why should I do transformation? Mostly they say, I want to transform, but I want to do this, but, and there's a blockage and there's a belief issue. Out of the hundreds of interviews I've done over the last couple of years, I think it boils down to this, that there are belief issues, like you say, is my strategy correct? There are blockages. I want to do this, but my CFO won't let me. I want to do this, but my CEO won't let me. I want to do this, but my team doesn't buy into it. So we've got strategic value issues, and we've got execution issues, because ideas, man, they're a dime a dozen. Sorry, that's an American expression. They're 10 pence for 12, yeah? Execution is where everything fails. Plain and simple. You can have tons of great ideas, but if you don't execute properly, you're gonna fail. So, lack of executive buy-in. My CEO doesn't buy into it. My CFO says no. I had the pleasure of interviewing a CFO. I say the pleasure because I insulted him. I didn't mean to, but effectively I said to him, this was Fred, who was from Novartis at the time, and I said, Fred, I gotta tell you, you're Mr. No. I'm sorry to tell you this, but this is the reputation you guys have. Mr. No. Every time someone comes to you with, I'd like to do this, it's no. No. Right? Am I? Or unless someone here is a CFO. No? Okay, good. Lack of team buy-in. So my team or my peers, the HR guy won't support me. The IT guy won't support me. My consultant doesn't understand me. The IT guy doesn't understand me. And the reason for that is I don't think we've calculated enough value or articulated what that value is. Let me go back to the story of Fred. So I said to Fred, okay, Fred, you're Mr. No, I'm sorry to insult you, et cetera, but how the hell does someone go to you and say, I need money to invest in a new transformation strategy, new software, I want to drive sustainability initiatives, et cetera. How do I do that without you saying no? His answer to me was very simple. Nobody understands me. Nobody understands what makes me tick. And what made him tick was risk mitigation. And what makes most CFOs tick is saving money, but equally, they're willing to spend money. They're willing to spend a lot of money if it's going to be to drive corporate goals like sustainability or to mitigate risk. So how often are you, when you're approaching your CFO, talking about risk mitigation? It's not a test. But communication is one of these big issues. Articulation is one of those big issues. So let's talk about execution. Oh my God, 3 minutes left. Execution. Lack of autonomy or lack of culture. That is what happens here as well. I don't have the autonomy to make a decision, or more importantly, I don't have the culture that allows me to fail or that allows me to invest in different types of transformational strategies. So what do you do with those things? Well, you need to see if your organization is actually ready for transformation. So to go back to the lady over here who said, we ran out of funds. Well, it's possible that what happens here, what is this transformation hoping to solve? How are we gonna do it? How am I gonna walk this A through Z for the entire process to figure out what could go wrong, right? How am I going to assess the capability of my team, assess the capability of myself to handle this transformation? And then, is the strategy the right strategy? And this is where I think a lot of companies fail as well. They are just wed to that strategy. They are married to that strategy. They're having babies. They're already buying the house. And it's the wrong strategy because they've not done a rigorous, repetitive capability assessment. They've not had cross-functional collaboration to assess the capability and communicate the value and the business proposition. So once you've done all this stuff, you go back to the drawing board if you've got the wrong strategy. Again, assess the strategy. Do the assessment capability. What's at stake? If you don't transform, you're not going to be around. And I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about your business. I'm talking about the whole entity. Because someone very intelligent said this. No, I'm just kidding. It was just me. Basically, you're going to be left behind as an organization, as others race ahead in transformation. That 30% of organizations that are succeeding at transformation, and again, I'm not talking about digital transformation, I'm talking about overarching transformation, transforming business models, transforming operating models, transforming hiring practices, cultural practices. Those are the companies that are going to steam ahead. That's me, by the way. And you can follow me. You can listen to my podcast. You can read my newsletter. You can join my events. Connect with me. Hold on, there's QR codes even. Look at that. I've transformed digitally as well. You can connect with me in any way and be part of maybe my podcast, ask questions, create content, help me connect you with other people that are succeeding. Yeah? So that is me. And I've pretty much stuck to time. What do you think of that?
I'm very impressed with your timing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I just have this image of a flock of black swans getting drunk on a cocktail crisis.
It's true.
Maybe sitting on a beanbag.
Yeah.
Depends how much you took from that presentation. Any questions from the room? I know I have some of my own that I'd want to go to. Yeah, we just have one at the front there.
Thank you so much. So I enjoyed truly this explanation. It was well prepared and really nice listening. So my question is about the unblockings. You were talking about the value articulation. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, with all the cocktail of crisis we've been through, do you think that there will be a shift in the value in the procurement and supply chain aspect today?
Yes, it's a shifting thing. Of course it is. The value articulation a year ago or 2 years ago in the middle of COVID was much more different than what it is today. But I think one of the things that we get wrong with value articulation is that we see value articulation through our own lens and not through the lens of the person we're speaking with. And so when I give that example of that CFO, it wasn't, even I asked the question wrong. How do I go to pitch you? How do I go to get money from you? And his answer was, well, you've got to understand what's important to me today. And so it is changing. And I think that also means that the profession is changing. If you think back to when I started 7 years ago, you just needed to know how to calculate well and juggle and do, and be attention focused. Now you need to be geopolitician, economist, strategist. You need to be digitally native pretty much. There's a lot that we need to do. But the biggest skill set isn't just being digitally or technologically advanced. In my opinion, the person that's going to succeed in the future is going to be someone that is agile enough to communicate and deal with the landscape that we're dealing with, the critical thinker.
Thank you very much.
Hope that answers your question.
Any further questions? No, I think we're all done. Maria, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.